My name is Dr. Abyss, and everything you read or hear here must remain here. The room was dark, save for the faint shimmer of containment lights reflecting off the crystalline specimen before me. It sat on the lab table like a sleeping giant, its translucent body alive with an internal glow, shifting hues of pale pink and violet. The specimen, retrieved from Titan by the DEV0UR mission, was unlike anything I had ever encountered in my lifetime of studying the unknown. It seemed neither alive nor inanimate, a paradoxical existence suspended between biology and mineralogy. 6 of my colleagues, the best minds from various fields, astrobiology, quantum biochemistry, crystallography, worked tirelessly in the sterile confines of Lab Theta. Each scientist meticulously collected data, their movements precise and purposeful. None of us spoke much. We didn't need to. The sheer majesty of the specimen demanded reverent silence. It had no discernible organs, no cellular structure, and yet when exposed to specific wavelengths of light, it reacted, pulsing, shifting, growing. The crystalline lattice expanded and contracted rhythmically, as if it breathed, and when it emitted that haunting harmonic hum, we knew it was not inert. The sound reverberated through the room, piercing something deep within our minds. It was as if the specimen spoke a language too grand for human comprehension. 2 weeks into the study, the breakthroughs began. The creature, if I could call it that, seemed capable of reorganizing matter at a molecular level. A shard of titanium left near its base was partially transformed into a prismatic crystalline alloy. Organic samples reacted even more dramatically, fusing with the specimen's matrix in ways that defied conventional chemistry. One by one, hypotheses were discarded as the rules of earthly science crumbled in its presence. And yet the allure of understanding the day it happened is seared into my memory. The experiment was simple at first. We had initiated a controlled pulse experiment, attempting to measure how the specimen responded to ultrasonic frequencies. The lab hummed with the machinery, the air heavy with anticipation. I stood near the observation panel, noting the irregular refractive patterns within the crystal's core. The faint hum of the specimen resonated deep in my chest, unsettling, as if I had heard it before. Dr. Abyss, the harmonics are spiking, Dr. Celine warned from the monitoring station, her voice tight with unease. Increase the frequency by 5%, I instructed. We need to push its threshold. Reluctantly, she obeyed. The hum intensified, filling the room with a resonance that made the air thick and oppressive. The specimen began to vibrate, its internal glow blindingly bright. For a moment, it felt as if we were standing in the presence of something divine. Then it happened. The first sound was subtle, almost imperceptible, a shift in the air pressure, like the crack of a distant thunderstorm. But then it came. A scream, not from the specimen, but from the very air itself. The crystal structure warbled, emitting a distorted resonance. The vibrations escalated, rapidly becoming a violent roar. The specimen ruptured from within, and that's when the explosion came. It wasn't a traditional explosion. The lab didn't just erupt in flames. Instead, shards of jagged pink and violet crystal shot outward, slicing through the air like spears. They screamed across the room, filling the space with a disorienting, deafening cacophony. The walls groaned under the strain, vibrating with a force that threatened to tear everything apart. I was thrown to the floor instinctively, covering my face, but the others weren't so lucky. The crystals were relentless. They struck equipment, walls, everything in their path. They tore through the air with a deafening howl. As I rose, still reeling from the noise, I saw what had become of my colleague. The lab was unrecognizable. Jagged crystalline growths, pulsing faintly in pink and violet, had overtaken the room. The air was thick with shimmering dust. Equipment lay buried beneath layers of crystal, but it was the others that drew my gaze. 6 of them. Dr. Celine, Dr. Harris, Dr. Nguyen, Dr. Patel, Dr. Monroe, and Dr. Okafor. They stood frozen, their bodies twisted and contorted. Their forms were partially fused with the crystalline structure, as if the specimen had claimed them as its own. One's face was encased in quartz, a single eye peering out. Another's arm had turned into a jagged, crystalline limb, fingers still gripping a shattered datapad. Dr. Monroe's chest had been torn open, their heart suspended in a cage of translucent spikes that pulsed in rhythm with the specimen's dying hum. They were alive. I could see their eyes darting in panic, their faces contorted in terror. Their mouths opened and closed, but no sound came out. Instead, the air was filled with a strange harmonic resonance, an eerie tone that seemed to originate from deep within their altered forms. It was as if their voices had been consumed and replaced by the very crystal they had become. I approached, my heart pounding, unable to look away from the horrific transformation. The crystal had begun to spread across their bodies, weaving into their skin, fusing their very beings with its alien structure. Their movements were jerky, as if the crystals were not just a physical prison, but something that controlled them. Their faces twisted in pain, mouths silent, except for that strange hum, an alien frequency that filled my mind with a maddening dissonance. In the center of the chaos, the specimen lay inert. Its core, once glowing with an internal light, had dimmed to a dull gray. The energy had been expended, consumed by the violent eruption. The creature, if it could still be called that, was dead, but its legacy, its influence, remained in the minds of my colleagues. Now more than just victims, they had become something else, connected to the vast, unknowable knowledge stored within the crystalline lattice. The Purple Lagoon containment team arrived an hour later, sealing the lab and declaring the scientists as subjects of study. I protested, demanding they be freed, but my words carried no weight. "They're alive," I argued, my voice trembling. "We have to help them." "They are not human anymore," came the cold reply. "Their value now lies in what they can teach us." Weeks passed, and I learned the full extent of the transformation. The scientists no longer required food or air. Their biological functions had ceased, yet their consciousnesses remained intact. Worse, they were no longer isolated minds. The crystals that now comprised their bodies acted as conduits, linking them to an unfathomable network of knowledge. Through this connection, they learned truths beyond comprehension, truths that could never be conveyed in human terms. Their thoughts were a blur of alien knowledge. 2 years have passed since that day. The lab remains a controlled site, the crystalline growths untouched, save for the careful study of researchers. My colleagues stand frozen, their bodies transformed into a grotesque testament to the consequences of curiosity. I visit them often, but not as a scientist. I visit them as a mourner, haunted by what we've done. I wonder if they remember who they were, if they even have the capacity to. Sometimes I think I see a flicker of recognition in their eyes, but it is fleeting, buried under the weight of the knowledge they now carry. I tell myself that this is for the greater good, that their sacrifice, unwilling as it was, will not be in vain. But when the hum of the crystals fades, and I am left alone with my thoughts, I wonder, how much of my humanity am I willing to sacrifice in the pursuit of knowledge? And what will remain of me when I finally uncover the universe's darkest truths?